Imagining pathways to peace in Ukraine, understanding the war with Russia through international relations theory. By the end of 2024, the Russo-Ukraine war had reached a stalemate. The Russian Federation continues its stance, while Ukraine worries about waning Western support due to other issues like the conflict in Gaza and Donald Trump's second term as U.S. president. What is the next step for the international community? How can a resolution be achieved? And what will it look like when Russia avoids the decisive defeat anticipated by the West? First, all the parties involved, Ukraine, Russia, the United States, and the European Union, must seek a resolution to the conflict through renewed negotiations. Previous attempts towards peace, such as the Minsk Agreement, scuttled by Ukraine, the Normandy format scuttled by pro-Russian separatists, and later efforts in Ankara scuttled by the West, failed due to differing expectations of the outcome. The ongoing conflict shows limited progress on the front lines despite Western sanctions on Russia and significant weapons transfers to Ukraine. As the situation continues, there is a possibility that fatigue from prolonged conflict could influence all sides to consider renewed efforts towards peace. Second, a new multilateral peace conference involving all parties will need to be convened, facilitated by neutral actors from various political and economic sectors. Initially, this may occur in smaller, private meetings and may already be underway. Subsequently, there should be a ceasefire, and refugees should be allowed to return to their homes with a guaranteed right of return on both sides of the current lines of control. Next, we can better understand the conflict involving Russia and Ukraine through international relations theory. Here, I discuss 4 international relations theory frameworks that help to explain the causes of the conflict from multiple perspectives. Liberalism attributes the cause to Russia's actions as an aggressive rogue state violating international law. Realism points to NATO and the West for inciting Russian security concerns with the continued eastward expansion of NATO, despite an informal promise after the reunification of Germany. Constructivist analysis examines Ukraine's policies on language use, which created ethno-linguistic tensions by restricting Russian language use for a third of its population in education and media, while renaming cities and streets. World systems theory draws from critical left thought to explain how competition and exploitation through capitalism divided Ukraine into different economic orientations between the East and West, while both the West and Russia, as imperial cores, seek control of natural resources. These different perspectives on the causes of the conflict also offer pathways to peace. What could future peace look like? Let's use the analysis from the international relations theory frameworks and a little imagination to explore potential solutions. Liberalism endorses democratic principles by advocating for Western notions of freedom and the right to self-determination. This approach allows the divided population of Ukraine to determine its own future. It is important to note that a significant portion of the Russian-speaking populace in Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk has strong ties to Russia and does not desire to rejoin Ukraine. Polling conducted prior to the 2022 invasion indicates that a majority of voters in Crimea do not support returning to Ukraine, partly due to past grievances, such as President Zelensky's former comedic remarks about their water supply issues. Additionally, pre-invasion polls reveal that many residents in the Donbas region favored joining Russia, as they remember when Kiev bombed them when the separatists took control of the east after the 2014 pro-West coup and Maidan Revolution. The notion of Russia gaining territory for peace is challenging for the West to accept. However, adhering to democratic principles and self-determination can guide the process of conducting new referendums on national determination under United Nations supervision, rather than Russian oversight. Previous referendums in the Russian-annexed regions of Ukraine lacked the international collaboration necessary to establish credibility for global acceptance. International supervision of local votes can address concerns regarding authenticity and accuracy. Ultimately, redrawing borders to create coherent Ukrainian and Russian-speaking communities, while avoiding isolated enclaves, will be necessary to achieve sustainable peace and stability. It is imperative to challenge the liberal West in addressing the issues highlighted by constructivist analysis. The repeal of Ukrainian language laws that suppress minority languages, ranging from Russian to Hungarian, in media and education, is essential. Liberalism promotes a multicultural society. However, following the 2014 coup and Maidan Revolution, removing an elected leader outside of liberal norms, Ukraine pursued right-wing nationalist assimilation, which fostered division by marginalizing significant Russian and Hungarian-speaking populations within its borders. For Ukraine to integrate into the community of Western liberal democracies, it must embrace liberal values, including cultural diversity. Unfortunately, since the conflict began, Ukraine has exhibited more authoritarian tendencies by restricting opposition parties, controlling the media, oppressing the Orthodox Church, and postponing elections. As the peace process progresses, there will be a reorganization of Ukrainian political elites with a shift from wartime to post-war considerations. Ukraine will need to restore its internal democratic debate process, where dissent and opposition are recognized as legitimate components of an inclusive national dialogue. Realism suggests that addressing the security concerns of both Russia and Ukraine is essential. A comprehensive agreement may be necessary, where Ukraine pledges neutrality in exchange for peace. Peacekeeping forces may need to be provided by neutral actors acceptable to Russia, such as Turkey or other BRICS members like Brazil and India. Hungary has consistently blocked Ukraine's progress with NATO due to concerns over the treatment of Hungarian language speakers in Ukraine. It is unlikely that Ukraine will advance with NATO if some members are reluctant to be drawn into direct conflict with Russia. Similarly, Russia is not willing to accept Ukraine's membership in NATO, analogous to how the United States would react if Canada or Mexico joined a military alliance with China. The Cuban Missile Crisis of the 1960s provides insight into such security fears experienced by the United States. Compromise will likely involve acknowledging Russia's leverage as a major power to influence this outcome. World systems theory suggests that there is a need to restore multilateral economic connections between Ukraine and its neighboring countries to alleviate the competitive dynamic between Russia and the United States. It is advisable not to force Ukraine to choose between aligning with the East or the West when it can establish trade relationships with multiple partners without falling under the dominance of any specific sphere of influence. For example, Norway and Switzerland maintain various agreements with the European Union without being members of the EU. Similarly, Ukraine could enter into separate agreements and participate in other networks, such as the Commonwealth of Independent States and the Eurasian Economic Union. In the past, the West's refusal to allow Ukraine to engage in tripartite trade agreements contributed to the situation where Ukraine had to choose between an Eastern or Western orientation. This binary choice led to divided loyalties and the protests of 2014. Therefore, it is important to recognize that Ukraine's geographic position necessitates the restoration of social and economic connectivity with all its neighbors, including Russia, in the interest of fostering future peace and cooperation. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission should be established to investigate and prosecute war crimes committed during the conflict. Despite discussions regarding international law, Ukraine, the United States, and the Russian Federation have not adopted the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. It is recommended that these nations collectively join the ICC to foster a new era of cooperation. Restitution for infrastructure destruction may be required when culpability can be established. This may place significant responsibility on Russia for damages. However, Russia is already in the process of rebuilding the territories it acquired during the conflict. Russia may retain control over many of these areas through new referendums under international supervision. Additionally, compensation for the damage to the predominantly Russian-owned Nord Stream pipeline may need to be considered if the perpetrators of the destruction are definitively identified. Such compensation could reduce restitution costs for Russia if Western nations are found responsible for the pipeline's destruction. International relations theory can be utilized to comprehend the causes of conflict and to apply these insights toward conflict resolution. This approach offers benefits for all stakeholders. Russia, as a major power, would not have NATO on its Ukrainian border. Ukraine could end the violence, seek multilateral economic connections, and rebuild for a collaborative future with both its eastern and western neighbors. The West stands to gain when liberal values and inclusive democracy prevail within a multicultural society. For Ukraine, turning away from right-wing nationalism and respecting minority rights is crucial. It must restore electoral processes, reinstate opposition parties, and honor the right to self-determination for regional Russian-speaking populations that wish to secede from Ukraine. Such measures would pave the way for normalizing daily life and achieving peace for all involved.